But after Ben asked his question at the very end, and Saylor just he gave the Braveheart speech. I mean, he was ready to just charge the front lines. He's like, we want to eat the world. And I freaked out. I was in the sauna and I was listening to this and I was just like so psyched. But I had nobody to talk to about it, you know.
How many chairs are you sitting on right now?
Hello, everyone, and welcome to One Chair. We have another interview for you today, as we were joined by Soleil, a founding member of MSTR True North and host of the Orange Pill Investor. We talked about the parallels between Tesla and MSTR, options trading, Bitcoin, and much more. During our recording, there were some power outages, so some of the editing may seem a bit off, and we apologize for that. With that said, let's get right into it. Here's our discussion with Soleil.
Hi, Soleil, and happy White Paper Day.
Yeah, I didn't even know that till I saw somebody announce it. I should probably be more in tune with our history.
All right, so let's start at the beginning. Just for the audience that doesn't know you, could you share a little bit of background? So, how did you get into Bitcoin? How did you get into options trading, and all the way to your way to True North, basically?
Yeah, that's going back a bit. So Bitcoin, I got into it. So there's a really smart friend of mine that I met actually on Facebook. I quit that app years ago, but I did meet a couple of really cool and smart people. And the two things that he mostly talked about were Bitcoin and Tesla. And I kind of just thought, you know, if this guy's this smart, like maybe I'll check it out. And it wasn't long before I was actually one of the admins on his Bitcoin for Beginners, you know, communities and stuff like that. And I would, you know, I think I had a cold storage device that no one remembers. It was called the Keep Key. And yeah, it was kind of junk. So I've iterated through several different cold cards over the years. And so this guy actually was the main one who kind of got me into it. And he had just tons of mining rigs, and he would tell stories about how he rented this apartment that offered utilities included. That was a big mistake, apparently. And the guy came through one day to like change the filters on the apartment, and he's like, "Why are there 40 computers in here with an exhaust leading to the window? You know, just blasting out all the hot air." And you know, so this guy was an OG, you know, way back in the day. And so he kind of got me into the Bitcoin space. But of course, I got into it for number go up technology, right? And so I was shitcoining and I'm trying to trade in and out of Ethereum. And I almost said you learn your lesson quick, but you don't always. And I think I would probably have I don't know. I probably lost 90% of my Bitcoin trying to trade in and out of Ethereum and trying to time that BS. So I did end up kind of learning that lesson. So I think this cycle is probably like my first fully like laser-eyed toxic Bitcoin maxi cycle. So I had been in it before, but I was just kind of not really understanding, I think, what I was holding. What was the second part of the question? How did I get into strategy?
How did you get into the options trading,
Yeah.
basically?
So another guy that I met in that space, mostly anarchists, he was kind of into, you know, tax shelter and investing. And I worked with this guy a little bit, and he's like, "Hey, look, all my clients need to start trading stock options." Like he was studying mostly momentum trading. And at that time, I still had a job. And so I really couldn't join in on these. I don't know if you're familiar with the app called Clubhouse. It's an app where, you know, it's kind of like Spaces, really, but that was all they really did. And so he would have these options trading spaces on Clubhouse, but I could never attend because I was working. And so I just went on YouTube and studied YouTube University. I probably listened to 1,000 hours of videos from Tasty Trade, the platform. They put out a lot of good research and content around options trading. And then there's another guy called In the Money on YouTube. His name's Adam, and his twin brother helps with the show. And I really just liked his teaching style. And so between those two, I pretty much taught myself options through just watching tons and tons of options videos, and then of course learning the hard way when you when you do something and lose money, then you just kind of remind yourself not to do that again. But I kind of say that that's all self-taught, but really it was watching those two channels that's what got me into options. And then of course strategy itself, I was attracted to initially just for the premiums, right? I could sell covered calls and generate a ton of option premium there. But it was when I saw Quant Bros 1 that I kind of realized that limited upside might actually be a scary thing. Like I started trading options in 2020, and from 2020 to 2024, like limiting my upside never really bothered me. If shares got called away, I was just completely agnostic and ambivalent about the stocks that I held. But when I saw what they put together and what strategy could do, I was like, holy crap, I might have to start paying attention to the other side of this trade.
You mentioned your friend that brought you into Bitcoin was also talking a lot about Tesla. Are you following the Tesla story as well? Because I noticed specifically this year that the two communities are kind of converging. There's a lot of people that were Tesla only or Bitcoin only that now talk about both.
Yeah, definitely. Tesla was actually the first company that I started to have some affection for. Like as I said, when I first started trading, I would literally sell puts or covered calls against anything. I would go to a site called Market Chameleon, and I would sort for highest implied vol. And if there was a ton of premium there, I would just sell it. If the premiums dropped off, I'd just exit that position and just move on to something else. But it was Tesla that was really the first company that made me think I should be bullish on this stock on its own. Like, it has the ability to disrupt. And the guy that I kind of get my daily Tesla hype from is this guy called Stephen Mark Ryan. And he just literally covers Tesla every single day like we cover MSTR. That's just it. For the last 4 years, the only thing he ever covers is Tesla. And then of course, he'll cover some of the competitors, the EV stocks. But Tesla is crazy. So if you follow Michael Saylor's advice, he said that you invest in a stock when it's number one, disrupting, and number two, the clear winner. And when I applied those two criteria to Tesla, it's just a perfect fit. They're probably going to put all of the gas car companies out of business in the next 5 to 10 years. I don't know in which order, but they're all pretty much doomed. Maybe a few Chinese EV companies will be, in the top 10, but it'll be Tesla at the top. But that's like the least bullish thing about Tesla. So the robo taxis is going to make their EV sales look like a rounding error. And then once they get Optimus rolled out, and let's just say that there's going to be 8 to 10 billion robots in 15 years. Tesla will have the lion's share of that market, I think. So that, those type of profits will make their robo-taxis look like a rounding error. So it's probably, I don't know. Robo-taxis is probably a 10x move, and then Optimus is another 10x from there. So Tesla and Strategy are the only two companies that I've really found that I have a long-term bullish strategy, and I don't really diversify. They're the only two positions in my portfolio other than a few miners, but I really only own the miners as like the teaching tools in a smaller account. Just to kind of show you what you can do with 5 or 10 grand if you can't afford some of the bigger names. But yeah, it's those are the only two stocks that I can really envision in my portfolio for the next 10, 20 years.
Yeah, agree with your assessment there. And I also follow SMR, and we're actually trying to get CERN on the show. I don't know if you know him, but he started talking about strategy as well. Originally more on from the Tesla side, but it would be interesting to talk to him to see his assessment of both MSTR and Tesla.
Yeah. Yeah, it does seem like they're converging, and we talked about disruptions a little bit on True North Wednesday, and I feel like the Bitcoin treasury space will either be where the innovations and disruptions come from, or the innovative and disruptive companies will just buy Bitcoin and join the space. So whether the innovations come inside or outside of the network, they will eventually join the network. So, I don't see any TradFi company that's even remotely interesting. If you're not going to own Bitcoin, I really just can't be bothered to look at you.
No, completely agree. I mean, we already see it coming. And I just want to come back to something that you mentioned is you said that's the first cycle where you feel you're completely orange pilled listening to you, I would think that you've been a Bitcoin maxi for at least 2 other cycles, to be honest. Why would you say that that's the first cycle where you're orange pilled? What changed?
Really, I think it was the 25 hours of Michael Saylor's on Breedlove's channel, the What is Money? That one really opened my eyes. I was kind of like, oh crap, like all of human history is about like kind of like escalation dominance, right? So you have to invent the spear to combat the sword, and then okay, now we need shields, and now we need horses, and now we need archers, and now we need gunpowder and projectiles, and that kind of culminates in, I still haven't managed to finish reading this book, Soft War by Lowry, and it kind of culminates there, because if we don't find another way to resolve our differences peacefully and with a nonviolent proof of work, then we end up escalating to nukes, and none of us survive that scenario. So it was really that series that kind of truly made me realize that Bitcoin is the only coin, and it's absolutely necessary for humans to not extinct themselves.
So since diving deep into strategy and getting involved in True North, has the way that you think of Bitcoin, but also strategy, has that changed or evolved over time?
Yeah, when I first started trading strategy, it was literally just a premium trade. They were delivering the highest premiums and the most consistent premiums. Since they were stacked on top of Bitcoin, they were inheriting Bitcoin's volatility. But after Quant Bros 1 and getting into, True North and listening to these guys talk, I started to realize that, kind of looking into the future, like as Bitcoiners, we already kind of have one foot in the future. But if I envision what that future will look like, I either have to assume that companies will continue to exist or they won't, right? Because there's a lot of, Bitcoin only folks who call people in the Bitcoin-treasury company space, shitcoiners or whatever, Bitcoin only, right? But if in 20, 30 years, if we imagine that we get hyper-Bitcoinization, then every person will own Bitcoin, every company will own Bitcoin. So it's not even really an option. Like all companies will be Bitcoin treasury companies at some point. So I feel like I might as well just go ahead and accept the future that we're trending towards. And if I don't think that Bitcoin or a company should own Bitcoin, then I'm kind of saying I don't think companies should exist. Right? You'll either own Bitcoin or you're gonna go out of business. So if all companies are going to own Bitcoin, then I have to ask myself, does this company align with my goals? Like, are they offering a product, offering a service, or taking the world in some direction that I want it to go? There's a quote, and I forget who said it, but it said that every dollar that you spend is a vote for the type of world that you want. And that's kind of how I look at strategy. The world is going to adopt Bitcoin, and strategy is paving the way and accelerating that adoption. So, like I want that to happen as fast as possible without throwing the world into chaos. And so strategy is converting the financial markets into a Bitcoinized one, and that aligns with my values. So not only do I assume that I will get an outsized, overperforming Bitcoin return, but it's also, aligns with my overall philosophy that, Bitcoin will become mainstream. And Jeff Booth likes to say 8 billion people will be in service of 8 billion people. And I'm really just trying to live long enough to see what that kind of world looks like.
Yeah, and with the fixed income products that strategy is putting on the market, you can really start to see a path, right, to this hyper Bitcoinization, or everyone having some type of exposure to Bitcoin.
Yeah, absolutely. So my mom is like terrified of anything in the stock market, right? She cannot imagine putting her money at risk. And so I couldn't believe when I found out that after COVID hit and her portfolio went down however many percent, she actually exited the entire thing to cash. Like, and it had been sitting in cash during the entire recovery. So she lost money when COVID hit and got none of it back when we got the V-shaped recovery. And so I've been just practically begging her to buy, when it was just the other preferreds, but like Stretch, I thought this is easy peasy for her. Like it's a stable coin. Like it's going to be pegged between 99 and 101, and she can get her 10% annual interest. And now with the way that they're describing it with the return of capital, there's even some tax advantages there. But she's just so fearful. I mean, she's the perfect candidate for this type of product, and I still haven't been able to convince her. Like it's harder even than like orange pilling people sometimes because of how fearful they are of the market in general. But yeah, she's probably the edge case. There, like it's a no-brainer for everyone else. Like even if you're not a Bitcoiner, the clear superiority of these products will win in the end. There's just no way that it can't happen. As the ratings improve, the preferreds will just become more accepted. And like when you're offering twice as much interest as your competitive products and you're safer, like they will disrupt the entire bond market. That's just seems inevitable to me.
Going a bit deeper into strategy, we're just coming off the earnings call for Q3 yesterday. What's your first reaction to that, and what do you think are the main takeaways from this call?
Yeah, so about halfway, he started talking about amplification, instead of leverage. And I'm still not sure if that's a distinction without a difference or if that's really a meaningful way to describe it. But it all just kind of seemed pretty routine. Like, I mean, we know what their EPS is going to be, right? I mean, everyone knows what the Bitcoin price is. We know how many Bitcoin they have. It's just simple math to figure out what they're going to report. But after Ben asked his question at the very end, and Saylor just he gave the Braveheart speech. I mean, he was ready to just charge the front lines. He's like, we want to eat the world. And I freaked out. I was in the sauna and I was listening to this and I was just like so psyched. But I had nobody to talk to about it. Yeah, that was the big one, was like right at the end. And I immediately went to our Signal chat and I was like, you got to clip this, like it's Ben's question and his answer just got me so psyched. And I immediately went to Twitter and there was just several other people that had felt the same way. They were like, I really needed to hear that they are just ready to stack sats. They're not going to bend the knee to the rating agencies. It's kind of just like there was a little bit of Saylor clapback. I mean, he had to say it diplomatically, but it was kind of like, okay, I know you're telling me that you're not going to give me credit for this Bitcoin, but I know Bitcoin's taking over everything. So all I have to really do is just sit and wait for you to figure that out, and the ratings will increase, and then they're going to get access to more capital, and it's just going to be this insane S-curve adoption, I think. And it's frustrating for us, over the, if you look at our year-to-date returns, but the long game is all but just a done deal, I think.
Yeah, fully agree. The last question and the answer was the highlight of of the 2 hour call. I
Mm-hmm.
think one other surprising thing, at least to me, was the way they're going to go after the international market and trying to issue those preferreds outside of the US in non-US dollar currencies. And I don't know, what are your thoughts maybe on the other Bitcoin treasuries that are already established in those markets, like the Smarter Web in the UK or Capital B in France, euro denominated? Do you think it's bad news for them, the strategy's announcement yesterday?
Yeah, I think I would be nervous if I heard that announcement, but at the same time, the way that disruptions occur is there's innovation is driven by an environment of open, cooperative competition, and so it kind of can't help but make both products better. And in a sense, for now at least, there's room for everyone because you're competing against the TradFi products, which are definitively inferior. So, Smarter Web and MetaPlanet and all of these other companies can still win. And I think there's room for everyone now. Maybe in 10 or 20 years, when they've eaten the entire bond market, we'll have to revisit that conversation and it might become like a winner take most scenario. But um, I was actually kind of shocked to hear that announcement as well. Yeah, hinting that they might be entering into a lot of the other foreign markets was a little bit of a surprise. Yeah, I think it's good overall, and the way that entrepreneurship works is anytime there are profit margins to be had, entrepreneurs attack it, right? So they deliver more value, they provide better products and services to customers for less money, and that's going to happen here in the preferreds as well. So, strategy is going to compete against each of these individual markets. The best products will do the best, and the customers will get the best products, and eventually those profit margins will contract. The interesting part is going to be how much interest a preferred can offer before it starts to run into Bitcoin's CAGR. So, Bitcoin's CAGR, I don't know, was it 50% now or something, but we're thinking it's going to slowly contract down to 40, 30, maybe 20. I think Dan Hillary said he thought it would probably go down to 20, but then kind of stay at 20, maybe close to forever. And so at some point, you kind of have to make sure that you can't offer more in a preferred than Bitcoin's CAGR. Otherwise, that's not accretive. That's the opposite, right? So it is going to be kind of a little bit of a game of chicken where people continue to try to outcompete each other's products and offer more and more interest. But you have to be wary that you keep at least enough profit margin yourself between the rate that you're offering and Bitcoin's CAGR. Just to make it worth your while.
Yeah, just a follow-up question on the preferreds, and we saw another thing on the earnings call. I thought that they discussed quite extensively how they would start doing marketing around those preferreds.
Mm-hmm.
So you really see that they want to ramp those up now, and with the credit rating that Strategy just got and increased marketing, do you think this is going to be a short-term thing to really see those prefs ramp up, because they seem to be under a bit of pressure to lever back up, right? Because this year they have been delevering significantly with ATM issuances, and one way to lever up would be those convertible bonds, but they really want to get away from that and ramp those preferreds, and it's been going slowly so far with weekly issuances between 20 to 40 million. So do you expect this to ramp up in the short term, or is that years down the line?
I mean, I hope it doesn't take years, but I'm not sure I'm a fan of commercials, like paid advertising and commercials. I mean, I know that they'll do the research. I mean, they've got their AI and business software that they can, and they can sit there and work with Grok or ChatGPT or whatever and figure out the optimal spend there, right? To make sure that you're, and they even said that as much on the call, that they'll do the analysis and figure out what's worth spending versus what they can get back from that spend. But I kind of don't like the idea of spending on advertising, because it's you're just not buying Bitcoin with that money. So in a sense, I just don't like it philosophically. And back to the Tesla thing, they don't spend money on advertising. I think they even said that during like a Super Bowl ad, if there's an ad for a electric vehicle, like the Google trends for Tesla goes up, because if you decide, okay, I'm going to buy an EV, what are you going to do? You're going to go and you're going to check out the commercial that you saw, but then you're also going to check the competitors. So Tesla kind of gets free advertising by letting other people advertise their cars, but then having a better product. So I think Strategy could do something similar with, like Bitcoin sells itself to a certain extent. And I feel like the preferreds do the same. And like, how much more exposure can they really get on commercials? Like Saylor's already on everything. You know what I mean? He's he's constantly being clipped and shared and memed. And, he's got like AI guys turning him into baby Saylor. And like, I don't know. I can't imagine spending a couple $1,000,000 on a Super Bowl ad just to get some stretch investors. So I hope the paid part remains small, and they just kind of let the organic thing kind of take its course. I think the preferreds should sell themselves, and Bitcoin is going to do the hard, heavy lifting for them. And yeah, I don't mind the marketing aspect. I just hope it stays very small as far as like the spending amounts, because you're every time you spend something, spend fiat on something that's not Bitcoin, you kind of become a little bit more Bitcoin poor. So I hope it's a small part of their budget.
Yeah, in the end, the best product, as you say, will win. But on the other hand, you need to balance that with getting awareness out there. And I think in the Tesla space now, the discussion is also around the FSD part, right? That the technology is getting so good, but there's no awareness out there, and only 10% of the drivers use it. So yeah, interesting discussion around advertising, good or bad.
Yeah, I think there's another parallel with Tesla in that, and it's probably why we're seeing a little bit of a hangover with the stock price and the waiting for the preferreds to mature and get more liquidity. So the way that Tesla did their rollout is they created a very expensive car for a small niche, right? And they made the best car. And then with the profits from that, they expanded and came out with other models, and they made the best category killer in that category. And then they came out with the Y, and now they have the best selling car in the world in that regard. And now they're going to come out with like what, a 25K vehicle. They're going to have the robotaxis. So they take the high profit margins from a small niche, and then they expand it to the masses. And that's the exact type of rollout that Strategy has done with the preferreds, right? So you offered strike, they had the call option, and then they said, you know what, let's make something at the top of the capital stack that's just going to be for institutional investors. That want the safest thing. And then they came out with STRD, and that's for people who want a little bit more yield and are willing to take a little bit more risk. And now they've got Stretch, which is like, okay, do you have a savings account or a checking account that pays you next to nothing? Yes. Okay, well, every single person on the planet would like to earn 10% tax deferred instead of their savings account getting them nothing. And it's completely liquid, right? So you don't have to lock yourself into like these 1 year, 5 year CDs or anything like that. You can just sell anytime you want. So I think there's a nice parallel there where Tesla created one category killer for every single category of vehicle, and Strategy is doing the same thing with the preferreds. And I don't know, he said it in an interview, so I thought maybe he let this slip, but then they also kind of hinted at it in the earnings call that they still need to come up with another couple of $1 billion worth of Bitcoin to meet their goal for the year. And they said, well, we got 2 months left. And so I think that at least one more preferred is going to be announced. And, just for fun, I'm just going to predict that it's going to be like some kind of variable interest rate tied to some kind of Fed funds rate. And, like maybe the Fed rate plus 5% or something, whatever is better than everything else that's in the market right now. But they're probably waiting for Stretch to get to 100. Like, you don't want to release that product until your previous product is doing well. So I think it would probably be looked at as a rug pull. If Stretch was trading at 97 and then they released, some new preferred, it would be like, come on now, you can't rug pull the previous preferred until it gets to 100. So hopefully, I haven't checked the price of Stretch today, but I think it was like 98 something.
It went
And
over
so
99 today. So
it did go
we're in
99.
the range
Awesome.
finally. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So, maybe that's kind of like the signal that they've been waiting for to release their next preferred. And if they can upsize it to, 1-2 billion, that gets them halfway to whatever they need. So between the ATM sales over the next 8 weeks, plus maybe one more preferred that comes out, they probably hit their goal.
I love this comparison with Tesla. Actually, I hadn't thought of it. I mean, between us, it's more Quentin, the Tesla guy. So maybe he had thought of it, but I haven't. So that's actually really, really interesting.
Real quick, while I'm thinking of it, the price hangover that we've had throughout this year, I think is even one more comparison to Tesla or really any production company. Because if you notice, when Tesla revamps a factory, right? So they're chugging out 10,000 cars a day or whatever. I don't even know what the numbers are. But, if they have to take that factory down for 2 weeks or a month to revamp it, you lose a couple $100,000 worth of production. But then they're 25% more efficient. And, over the next 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, you catch up and now you're actually producing more vehicles. But during that one earnings report, you kind of have to come out and say, okay, our delivery numbers are down because we shut down this factory. And I think that's part of what's happening with Strategy's price right now is they had a certain level of efficiency with their convertible bond deals, right? So they were, okay, we'll take 2 billion here, 5 billion here, whatever. And that was kind of just chugging along. And they've kind of said, okay, well, we're going to halt production on that factory. And now we're going to roll out these preferreds, but it's taking time for that to really mature and get the liquidity up on that product. So I think we're just kind of dealing with some low production numbers temporarily, and I hope it gets ramped up in the next 12 months, and maybe Bitcoin gives us another run, and something magical will happen. But I said something similar to on Wednesday that my time horizon is very similar to Bitcoin, right? So no one has ever held Bitcoin for 5 years and lost money. And so I think if you're going to invest in a Bitcoin-treasury company, that's a very reasonable way to think about it as well, right? If you're going to be built on Bitcoin, then you're probably going to have an investment time horizon that's very Bitcoin-like. And I was kind of like, Saylor was copying off my homework last night because he said something very similar. He doesn't watch my show. It totally did not happen, but it's nice for me to think so.
Yeah, absolutely. And speaking of this timeline, actually, just maybe shifting a little bit gears here, because I want to know your intake into the cycle, right? Up until now, we've had those 4-year cycles, whether it's based on the halving or whether it's more the macro outlook. It looks like this year we're looking at something different, and people keep saying that. So maybe just, I don't know if you have any thoughts on this cycle per se, and if you think it's different.
Yeah, so it's funny, because like you said, I had been in Bitcoin, but I wasn't really that Bitcoin maxied out, I guess. And then at some point when I saw people talking about 4-year cycles, it was very intriguing because everybody likes to be able to predict, right? You'd love to be able to sell the top and buy back down at the bottom, right? Plan B had his stock to flow model. And then, of course, there's the power law people. And there's all kinds of iterations of different models. And I think Dan H was actually showing Bitcoin is actually kind of adhered to the business cycle recently. And so if they keep printing, then maybe the business cycle is, maybe there's a super cycle in business, and then Bitcoin just follows along with that. But the Fourier cycle was very enticing to me because we like predictability. We like to be able to think that we figured out some kind of pattern. But then, of course, there's the reverse psychology aspect where if everybody figures it out, then it has to do the opposite, because now everyone is acting and trying to like front run each other and, find an exit position. And then it just ends up, not being a self-fulfilling prophecy. And so I was kind of like talking myself into the Fourier cycle. And then I'm like trying to use reverse psychology and talk myself out of the Fourier cycle. And the way that I kind of ended up landing, especially with my options trading, is it's a hard thing to wrap your head around when you put yourself on a clock, right? So if you buy an option, you have chosen an expiration date. If you do not choose an exit, one will be chosen for you, right? And that is when your contract expires. So it's something that is probably not intuitive and hard for Bitcoiners to learn, because we can just diamond hands hodl through anything. It doesn't matter. If you buy the top at 67, you just wait 4 years and now it's 120. It just doesn't matter for us. But when you put yourself on a clock with an option, you don't have that luxury. And so the way that I'm positioning my portfolio is assuming that, we are in some kind of bull market, and that will last at least until end of 2025, maybe extended into 2026. And then I have a decision to make. Do I adhere to the Fourier cycle, or do I continue to go even longer leveraged and believe in the super cycle? And for me, I have to look at the game theory on that, right? If I predict that super cycle is coming and I add a ton of leverage, if we don't get a super cycle, then all of those positions get wrecked, right? If I predict that we're getting a 4-year cycle, I take off all the leverage, and then we get a super cycle, the worst thing that happens is I just miss out on some upside, right? So assuming that the super cycle will continue, at least with respect to leverage, I kind of have to assume that it's not coming in order to prevent my portfolio from, catastrophic losses. And, I'll just have my regular shares of strategy, and I'll have my Bitcoin and cold storage. And if we get the super cycle, great, I'll make, linear returns on that. But it's not like I'll be crying myself to sleep because I only got linear returns, right? But the reverse is not true. If I bet it all on a super cycle and lose that bet, then my portfolio, gets destroyed. So that's kind of, I'm taking an agnostic opinion on whether we get one or not, but I'm just trying to plan for the worst and make sure that I avoid disaster.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. Risk management is important, right? You mentioned the 4-year cycle or the super cycle. There's a third cycle type that is being discussed. It's the extended cycle. So we will have a crash, but it will only come after 5 years this time around because of the business cycle. What your thoughts are on that?
Yeah, and this is going to be a very American 2-year election cycle as well. All the feds kind of work in concert. So even if like the U.S. economy isn't driving the whole world, I think that, politicians like to get reelected, and they like to get their cronies elected. And so with respect to the United States, at least, it wouldn't surprise me if they just dump interest rates, print a ton of money, in attempts to pump the stock market and make it look like the people who are in power now are doing a good job, right? And then U.S. midterm elections, maybe they get a bunch of their buddies reelected. So I think there are a lot of incentives from very powerful people to make something like that happen. And that would be, that would help the business cycle at least extend through the US midterm elections. Um, I I know there's a lot of chaos in all of the political spheres throughout the world. Definitely in Europe, obviously, Middle East, and so I think all the Feds are going to be printing, right? So it's not just like, okay, the U.S. Fed is going to print and the rest of the world's not going to print. Like, no, everyone's printing. Like everyone is trying to debase the money and make sure that they hide the deflationary pressures. So I think that lends itself to what you're talking about with an extended cycle and maybe a modest crash. But yeah, that's a possibility as well. And if that happens, I guess that's just more of a less serious 4-year cycle, right? And so in that case, I probably still wouldn't want to have a ton of leverage. Like even a 50% crash, if you own leverage, is like 150% losses. So, leverage is good when the number's going up, but it's pretty devastating to your portfolio if the number goes down, even if it's only 25 to 50% corrections.
Exactly. So you're mentioning leverage. So maybe we can go on to the next topic. I would say is the options trading, because obviously you're quite known for that, right? And
Yeah.
now my first question on the options trading is really, how would you play the options trade, maybe combined with the S&P 500 inclusion?
So when True North started, we would go over all of the catalysts, right? The upcoming catalysts, and it was like, okay, we got this historic option. Uh, tons and tons of people are in the money, and maybe people are going to exercise, and maybe we'll get a short squeeze. And then it was like, okay, the elections. There were all these catalysts, and we've pretty much run out of most of those catalysts. Like, there aren't too many left. Like, but S&P 500 inclusion is one. Lowering interest rates is one. The maturation of the preferreds is another catalyst. But I'm kind of, I guess I'm kind of bearish on S&P 500 inclusion at this point. I was really excited. I was like, oh, okay, they got rated. Maybe that was the step that they needed to get into the S&P 500, but it doesn't look like it. I did a little bit of research, a little bit of grok fu, and apparently no one has ever gotten into the S&P 500 with that low of a rating. So you kind of need like triple B minus to get in. And that's not going to happen anytime soon. So initially I was kind of bullish. I was like, maybe we'll get in on the second or third try. But until that rating comes up, I think they're just going to be at a stalemate. That's not really happening. So it used to be in my plan, like, okay, maybe we get S&P 500 inclusion Q3, Q4 of this year, and maybe we'll get some kind of pump from it. I don't think it's coming. So I've never been I've never been more worried about my long call option leverage than I am now, like at least on the short term. But my long-term thesis really hasn't changed. But yeah, unfortunately, I'm not building an S&P 500 inclusion into my strategy at all.
Maybe one last question about the education, right? Because obviously we're looking into trying to bring the whole Bitcoin-backed securities, whether it's really the equity or not, with all the preferreds and so on. And maybe from True North, is there any learnings that you've had or anything that you've seen that really appeals to people, right? Because when I try to explain it, or when we try to explain it to people, like it's obviously it's a very complex topic. First, you need to understand Bitcoin, you need to understand TradFi markets in general. And I don't know, is there anything that you saw that kind of works a bit better, or any learnings there?
No, I wish there was. You have to be very aware of who you're talking to, right? So when I'm talking to a guy, and this is actually a true story. So I was talking to a guy in the sauna, and usually I'll just be like, you guys want to talk about football or Bitcoin? What are we talking about today? And usually they want to talk about, American football. But every once in a while, I'll get somebody that's like, oh yeah, I'm into crypto, and then they'll own Ripple or XRP or something stupid, and I just like, okay, I have to figure out who I'm talking to here. And so when I'm talking to someone like that, I can't just attack Ripple directly and say, you own $50,000 of shitcoin, right? Like, so in that case, I might say, well, the red flags for owning a shitcoin are a pre-mine, no fixed supply, proof of stake instead of proof of work, and it's a centralized coin, right? And then I can let him decide for himself if what he owns, is in that category. And then, you might be talking to someone else, and I think that number go up technology is kind of like the ultimate Trojan horse to get to almost everyone. So we start to learn so much that we just want to go into like all the Austrian economics and stuff like that. But I think for most people, it's probably just number go up, and then they get tricked into understanding Bitcoin the same way that we do. But there's another type of person who just doesn't really care about money. They're a little bit probably pessimistic with civilization and society in general. And I was at this dinner party, and I noticed that some of the people that I was talking to, they're very interested in income inequality, right? They're people who have a lot of money, but they're very interested in redistributing wealth to poor people. And so I really can't approach that person with number go up technology because they really just don't give a shit, right? And the way that I think I was able to kind of orange pill them in a way was asking them what they're interested in. And, one of the criticisms that they had for Bitcoin was that the people with all the money are the only ones that can afford Bitcoin. But my point in that case was, okay, well, you care about poor people, right? And the answer was yes. And in that scenario, I said, well, the person who only has like $100 for groceries is the one who benefits the most from Bitcoin, because if they put their money in Bitcoin, they get richer forever. And it doesn't matter if the rich people get 10 times richer, right? It's more important that someone with very little money gets to benefit from the abundance that Bitcoin creates. So that's kind of like the angle that I would come from, depending on what type of person. So if you want to be more effective at orange pilling, you kind of can't just say, okay, this is the strategy that appeals to the most people. You have to understand the person that you're talking to, and realize that some of the orange pill reasons will work on some more than others.
I think it's a great way to end it. So where can people find your work, Soleil?
So my X handle is @KnightWhoSaysKnee, and the YouTube channel is exactly the same. So I'll see you guys out at Bitcoin conferences. Maybe I'll try to hit Europe next year, and yeah, I'm having a lot of fun at these events, and so I'll see you guys around. Thanks for having me on the show. This has been an absolute pleasure.
Then we'll see each other for sure. And thanks so much for the time.
Thanks a lot for your time. It was great.
Yeah, man. Thanks, guys.
How many chairs are you sitting on right now?